Gotta love passive aggression. Hey everyone, it's Ian
Absolutely.
here. Hello, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. My name is Ian, and I'm joined by Ken and Paul from Changescape Web, and together we are your marketing guides. Now, today's an exciting topic. It's all about artificial intelligence for small business marketing. So artificial intelligence, also known as AI, as most of you know, is evolving really, really quickly. And ChatGPT and other AIs are getting tons and tons of press right now. And small businesses are being bombarded, absolutely bombarded with messages of how these AI tools will make marketing effortless. Press a button, boom, your marketing's done. At least that's what people are hearing. But is this true? And are some of these messages simply misleading or riding the wave of a trend, but not delivering on the goods? Well, our marketing guides will answer this important and timely question by diving into the benefits and challenges of using AI in marketing. And today we'll provide practical insights and best practices for you, the small business owner looking to leverage this awesome technology. So let's jump right in and start with this exciting topic. Ken, let's start. We got to baseline this and make sure everybody's on the same page. What
Sure.
is artificial intelligence and how does it apply to small business marketing?
Yeah, well, AI basically is just it's computers or machines that are able to crank through a lot of data that they've been collecting that would normally require human intelligence and analytics and decision making, problem solving to be able to make sense out of all of that data or information. And so, because it's machine driven, the results can be pretty fast compared to a human trying to process that volume of information. That just isn't going to happen. So there are some interesting things happening for sure. It's look, AI has been around for a long time, and I think a lot of people are like, ooh, Chat GPT being integrated into Bing is going to eliminate people using Google for search. Here's a newsflash, folks. Google's been using AI for a hell of a long time. So don't think that this is new. It's just they're not putting a spin on it the way Chat GPT and OpenAI have, and being opportunistic and good for them because they need to, because they don't have the market share, trying to do something to create and generate some buzz around what's happening and what's possible in the world of search. But the reality of this has been going on for a long time. It's automating processes and trying to streamline and ease workflow. It eliminates errors, if you do it right, if you set it up right, so that things aren't forgotten. You can do it for audience targeting. You can do it for content creation, optimizing the performance of campaigns. Although a caveat, you should never just trust AI because a lot of this stuff can be great, but it needs to be checked and vetted and reviewed. Like I said, it has the ability to process massive amounts of information. One of my concerns is the information that it's collecting is not giving credit to the original content creator for the source, first for source attribution, but second, the people who create content and sell that for a living as a way that they're paid, they're not taking advantage of any of this. There's a question about how cool is this really, because is it ripping off people's content and information and not adequately rewarding them and paying them for such. So, but is it something to look at and take advantage of? Absolutely. Every small business needs to be aware of what's happening, and whether they choose to do it themselves or not, or leverage somebody who has the expertise in working with these tools to find, to know if the information is good or bad from what is generated. They need to be taking a look at it for sure.
Yeah. I love that you worked in the word tools, because I think that often when I think because we're predisposed to movies about AI and, smart robots that are sentient beings that can basically do what humans do, that people jump to that conclusion. And that's not what AI tools are at this point. And they really are tools to help rather than to take over a role specifically, right? Like you can't say, you know, or can you can I should phrase this as a question. Can you ask an AI to do your marketing for you?
You can ask the AI to create a lot of marketing assets, but to actually do it, I'm not really. I mean, we're not to the point where we're creating Cylons yet. Thank goodness. Um, or even those creepy
Battlestar Galactica, just for those who haven't,
yeah,
heard of
or those
Cylons.
creepy robotic dogs that you see. I mean, those things would freak me out, and those things are getting smart. You know, but there are also, I mean, and this has nothing to do with marketing, but AI has the potential to really revolutionize so many different industries. For example, I just saw a study that it's allowing doctors using AI to detect lung cancer that humans can't detect right now. So there are obviously massive risks and ethical concerns that we need to be figuring out, but at the same time, the innovation and the power of what's becoming possible simply can't be ignored, and we've got to find a good balancing act.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. The one thing that always comes to mind, and I've seen this time and again, whether it's marketing, whether it's any kind of tool, system, process, is that a tool in the hands of a master is far different than a tool in the hands of a layman or somebody that's just learning, right? And so I
Right.
think that's one of my we'll later on we'll explore some of the pros and cons of AI, but I think to me that's a really important concept that, if you're not a marketing expert, using AI yourself can sometimes be really dangerous because you can't properly vet the results that it's producing for you, right? So
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
think that's just
Hmm.
something to keep in mind. Um, Paul, in what ways can small businesses leverage artificial intelligence to help with their marketing?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways they can leverage it. But just like to kind of add on to some of the things Ken said about the the way AI, it's kind of ripping off content creators, and it is doing that. And we kind of been brainwashed into thinking that these giant tech companies are these all-knowing gods. And keep in mind, when Google rolled out Bard, it was an absolute disaster, which it was actually kind of funny if you
And
watched it.
Bard is Google's AI, correct?
Yes,
Kind of like the Chat GPT.
yeah, but
A little bit of a Cylon effect right there, Ian, with your
Yeah,
voice. I'm not sure what's going on.
yeah, it was.
really.
But AI is, people have been interacting with AI whether they know it or not. If you have one of those little vacuum robots that crawls around and vacuums your carpets and works its way around furniture, that's a form of AI. It's not new. Come on, don't you watch Star Trek? It's been around forever. But CRMs and automation, it uses artificial intelligence. It can help you personalize content. It can help you, it can generate offers, chatbots. Any website you've ever gone to that has a chatbot or a little chat widget on the website, that's artificial intelligence. It can, and now it's not really new, but it's becoming pervasive now. But it can help you create content. It can, and Ken talked about this, that you have to vet that content. You have to look at it. You can't just plug something in, and it's still the whole thing about garbage in, garbage out kind of thing, that if you put crap in, you're going to get crap out. So it comes down to the prompts that you put in, the input that you give the artificial intelligence is going to determine the output that you get. So you have to understand that. You know, it, Google Analytics is artificial intelligence. Okay. And it can help you analyze customer data, website data, and what people are doing on your website. And that can help you optimize your website. It can help you optimize your marketing messages. It can help you optimize your content. Talked about content creation, even sentiment analysis. It's something that, how are people responding to your marketing efforts? How are they responding to the content on your website? Are they going to your website? Are they spending time on your website? Are they going from this piece of content to that piece of content? And that goes back to Google Analytics or whatever kind of analytics software you're using. But AI is not new. It's been around, like Ken said, it's been around for a long time. And now it's just, I think we've gotten to a point where it's becoming smarter and smarter, so to speak. But if you're not using a CRM, I don't know how you can survive this day and age if you're a business and not using a CRM. And any CRM worth the money you're paying for it is using artificial intelligence for this kind of optimization. And this, we talk a lot about something, missed call text back, where someone calls your business and no one's there to answer the phone, and you immediately get, or the customer gets a text saying, "Hey, sorry, we missed your call." Okay, that's artificial intelligence of your CRM. So there's a lot of different ways that small businesses can use AI, and a lot of it's going to be baked into their CRM system if they have one. And if you don't have one, you should get one.
You mentioned sentiment analysis. Um, you know, if you have a lot of Google reviews on your website, guess what? Google is doing sentiment analysis of all of those reviews to see what are people saying, and that is going to have a factor or be a factor on your search rankings based on the sentiment of what people are typing in when they leave a review for your business. And so this is not new. I mean, this is the thing that, it's new just because the awareness is new to a lot of people, but these things have been going on for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The awareness is new. Artificial intelligence isn't new, but the awareness of what it is and what it can do is new.
Well, I think what's interesting, and we could go down a huge rabbit hole, which I don't think we should do, so I'm hesitant to even bring this up, but there is a difference between algorithm, which are rules-based data analysis, basically, right? And then you have artificial intelligence. And I actually disagree a little bit. I don't think artificial intelligence has been used as in huge forms in the last 10 years. I think it's only been the last few years where businesses have hesitantly, because there's definitely some risk involved with this, and this is why Google hasn't come forward, or they didn't come forward until after this explosion of ChatGPT, is because the businesses have been worried about, there's been tests where some AI systems have kind of run out of control and given some really weird stuff. So they've been hesitant to really open the floodgates. But as far as public consumption, I think that's what ChatGPT has done, is really just blown the doors open, because it's the first accessible form of AI, which is really just a language learning system. And it's not always super intelligent, because it's just spitting out kind of amalgamated information that it gathers from different sources, the top sources on the internet, right? So it spits out flawed information all the time, although it's getting better. But I think that's important for people to understand. And then also that we are very deep into AI because we've been looking at it for probably 2 years. It's become more and more popular from a marketing standpoint. The discussion, the tools have become available. But even there, like a year ago, most of those tools were absolutely horrendous. The results they were giving were crap. It's only been in the last, I want to say, 6 to 8 months where we've started to see some really interesting developments where it's like, okay, the tools are getting better. So for the average business owner, these would not have been, within your purview at all, because even from CRM systems, it's only since ChatGPT became popular that people are starting to pop up and saying, hey, we have AI in our CRM, and we have AI in this, right? It's become kind of the ingredient you have to include in software now to be on the leading edge. So I think
Yeah,
that's important to understand too for the average business owner.
yeah, it was certainly the tipping point, because AI has to learn, and in order to learn, it has to fail, and it has to keep making mistakes, and it has to gather more and more data, and all of that just takes time. And we've gotten to the point where there's clearly been a maturation process, and now a publicly available set of tools, and an exposed API that other software developers can take advantage of that, to where that's where you're seeing the explosion right now. It kind of reminds me of what happened when Twitter launched, in 2006 or seven, whenever it was. There was an explosion of tools that would allow you to do all kinds of amazing things that you'd never been able to do before using just Twitter and these tools. I mean, you could watch presentations live streamed just by reading a Twitter news feed because people were using hashtags. There were just so many crazy tools. 90% of those died out very quickly, and some of them were acquired and absorbed into the platform. Some of them gained legs and were able to grow and survive. And that's what's going to happen with what's going on with AI right now.
Yeah. The other thing I should mention too, just because everybody's on a different plane of understanding, is that right now when we talk about AI, we're not talking about one single artificial intelligence platform. The chat GPT is OpenAI. OpenAI is the company that owns it, and OpenAI is certainly one of the bigger ones. But as Paul mentioned, Google has Bard, and other platforms, Microsoft and Intel, and all of these other companies have their own versions that they're playing with and have been playing with for a while. But just so people aren't running scared in the streets that there's this one master artificial intelligence out there. That's not the case. These are just competing platforms that are trying to basically accomplish the same thing.
Yeah.
Ken, AI is getting a lot of press for content creation. We've touched on that a little bit, but maybe you can share some use cases with small business owners about how content creation and how AI specifically can help with that to help them do their marketing better.
Yeah, I think it was Paul that mentioned prompts, and there's an emerging field called prompt engineering that that is going to become really important. I think the quality is going to be all about prompts, but you can go into a tool like ChatGPT and say, give me 5 blog post titles on this topic, and it will generate those 5 or 10 or whatever you specify. You can have it write blog posts. Again, you have to use the right prompts, but you can basically say, write a 750 word blog post on this topic.
And Ken, just to interject, because I think this is a really key point for people. So if they do those prompts, and if you say, hey, I want 10 topic ideas for blog posts on this topic, just so people understand the quality they're getting, how many, just roughly from your experience, how many of those are actually good ones, or how many need refining?
That's hard to say in general, because
Yeah.
I've seen it where I would have said that I could use any one of those 10 that were generated. Typically, though, what I find is there are usually a couple that are probably really good to go.
Yeah.
But you can also take elements of all of the others that were generated and kind of merge those together and maybe even come up with a better idea. But, and again, that's where AI may not give you the perfect solution, but look, if it does the heavy lifting for you to present the ideation and the results of that, and so that you're not bogged down in that, but then you can look and you could say, oh, this is really good, but if I combine this one with this one, that's really the best one. And so from that perspective, I think it's right now still, I think a human typically needs to be involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a human that understands what, like, again, going back to the master of the layman with the tool, I
Right,
think that's where people get confused, is that if you or I put in a prompt and we get spit back certain results, we very quickly know what's good and what's bad, right? Because of
right,
our experience and our expertise. A content writer would be the same, another marketer would be the same. But for a layman, what worries me the most, because I've actually seen it happen where people just take what it spits out, thinks it's perfect because they don't really have the framework or expertise to really dissect what's good or bad. I think
right.
that's where things go off the rails pretty quickly, because they can't filter what's good or bad.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are tools that will slice and dice and create social media posts
Yeah.
from a blog post that you create using artificial intelligence. Those are great. You can have it write product descriptions. One of our favorite things, I think, to do, I think, Ian, you and Paul would agree with this, is to leverage the power of AI to apply better SEO principles, because those tools give us the ability to have visibility into a whole lot more data than we would normally easily be able to collect and gather ourselves, and it presents it to us so that we can make better decisions. But we still are having to make those decisions. So it's really it's a set of productivity tools in the right hands can be very powerful. As you said, Ian, in the wrong hands, it can be flat out dangerous because some of the information is going to be completely wrong and inaccurate. And if you're in a business where you put somebody's life at stake based on content that you put on your website, and you blatant, I mean, you didn't do your due diligence to find out that something that was generated from AI is just flat out wrong and incorrect and could, cause damage to somebody. We haven't, I don't know of any instance that that's happened yet. It's going to happen sooner rather than later, unfortunately. And who knows what's going to happen in the legal realm. One of the interesting things that I've seen is actually, speaking of legal realm, again, all of the case studies and precedents that are out there, AI is going to have an opportunity to do a lot of that work, and gather and pull that information together a lot more quickly. And so that's an area that's maybe a little susceptible in terms of job loss. Anyway, that's kind of a side note. Um, the other thing that's interesting, and I still find most of the output from image editing to be somewhat bizarre still.
Yep.
But it's getting better, and it's getting better quickly, to where you can type in a description of a green unicorn jumping over a block of cheese, saying a curse word as it does a triple sow cow.
How
And
That's the exact search I did. How did you That's amazing.
I've got some AI help, buddy. But yeah, you can produce that image, and you're not going to find that, but probably by doing a search for an image, and either to buy that picture or find open source, or Creative Commons, so sure, you can create that image. Is that useful? Probably not. But, I mean, even Canva is doing this now,
Mm.
so if you're using Canva, you have the ability to use their AI to generate and create brand new, fresh images that, and look, I mean, there's one guy, there's a man and there's a woman that I see over and over and over again. I bet I've seen them 1,000 times. I've probably used one of those two in some of my pictures a long, long time ago. And if you're in the business of consuming a lot of content, which we all are because we have to stay up to date, it's pretty easy to say, "Yep, stock image, stock image, stock image," because it's the same people.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so, AI is exciting from that perspective, but it's also troubling because there are a lot of people who make their living creating those photos and selling them to systems that allow agencies and businesses to be able to buy those images and use for our purposes based on the licensing through that agreement.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm curious to see how all that shakes out. Voice generation is also another interesting thing. I mean, even curating and creating radio stations, is now falling into the realm of AI. I mean, it's permeating through a lot of different industries, and all of those have implications for marketing. I mean, so for example, if you're a marketer and you make a lot of money on your website by letting people run ads on your website, um, that business may go away or largely be impacted by what happens with AI as AI starts to either change search, search engines or displace search engines. A lot of content creators who make money by, putting and either receiving or collecting or charging money for content placement. Who knows how that's going to shake out.
Yeah. Yeah. One of
And
the
that,
one of the
that that could be a strategic marketing decision, where you pay to have your content placed on a particular site because your audience is going to that site.
Yeah. One of the things that has occurred to me, and I've certainly read nothing on this to date, but because how AI works, it's basically going out and finding data that can support an answer to your question, at least what it thinks is an answer to your question, or the best answer to your question. Is I'm curious how, and I don't think we have an answer for this, so I'm just raising the question, but just like we saw during election times in different countries and stuff like that, where um, a herd mentality happens, and what happens on the social channels is you end up in an echo chamber because you are liking and consuming certain information from a certain crowd or universe of people, that it creates like this feedback loop, right? So not only is that the information you're interested in, but the algorithms of those social channels start feeding you more and more and more of that, so that it almost becomes a more prevalent idea in your mind. You think that, oh, everybody's thinking about this. And I think what's occurred to me with with AI is that in the same way as we're populating it, or populating our websites, our social networks with AI driven content that may have a slant in a certain direction, whatever it may be, and whatever content we're creating, I'm curious whether this might even create its own feedback loop, because now the AIs are referencing the most used content that's been created by an AI, if that makes sense. But that's
Yeah, it's the whole alternate facts kind of a thing, right? So, I mean, the AI is only going to give you results based on the sources that it's, that it has access to, that it can build and sift through and, make decisions and learn from. Um, it's a real risk. I mean, it's a huge risk
yeah.
for sure.
And that's a really interesting point too. We have lots of other questions, so I need to move on. But that's an interesting point too, Ken, is that the perception that the AI is coming up with these ideas on its own isn't true, at least not to this point, right? It's really just amalgamating what's it perceives as the most correct return of a response to the question you're asking.
Based on the access to the information that it has.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it is not the end all be all.
It's
It does
not a
not have
brain.
access. It does not have access to every piece of data in the world.
Right.
And what Ian was talking about with AI and social media, it's definitely going to create a feedback loop, because the goal of social media is to keep you on their platform, and they do that by feeding you content that their AI algorithms think that you want to see. So it's not going to give you alternate perspectives. It's going to feed you content that you want to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which also has implications that if you haven't broken into that circle where people are like, "Hey, I want to see your content," how are you ever going to break into that circle?
Mm, for as a business, even,
Right. Yeah.
or an authority in a space. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Um, Paul, how can an AI assist a small business in their SEO efforts? We've kind of talked a little bit around that, but not really in detail. Can you add some more color to that?
Is purple good?
Purple's great.
So
That a setup? Did Ken wear the purple shirt and it's like one of those influencing things? You saw purple, so you said purple. I don't
No,
know.
I was just in the mood for Grateful Dead, so
one
I
of those
put on
influencers.
my Stella Blues shirt. So
I think it all goes back to, it can help or it can hurt. You have to understand what the data is telling you, and an AI output about data. So yeah, it can help you with keyword research, and like I said earlier, and Google Analytics is all AI driven. It can help you find topics for content creation. It can help you analyze website data. It can help you optimize your on-page SEO. It can help you with your technical SEO and your structured data. But what small businesses need, you have to understand what the software is doing. On WordPress websites, we use a plugin called Yoast, which, you put a keyword in there, and then it will say you should do this or you should do that. And one thing I've seen from a lot of marketers and a lot of people that want to do this themselves is they say, well, I put this keyword into Yoast, and so I'm telling Google I want to rank for this or that. No, you're not telling Google a damn thing. You're putting a keyword, a search term, whatever you want to call it, into Yoast, and Yoast is saying, based on what we know about Google's ranking algorithm or algorithms, there's more than one, you should use your keyword in your alt image tag. You should use this keyword in your H2 tag. You should use this keyword this number of times within your content. You're not telling Google anything. Google doesn't care about you. I know that hurts, but the point is, you're not telling Google, here's my piece of content and you should rank me for this keyword. That's not what's happening. You're putting a keyword into an AI driven piece of software that's saying, based on what we know about Google, this is what you should do. That doesn't mean Google's going to do what you want it to do. That's not how it works. And that's the whole thing. It can help if you understand what the AI is doing, what the software is doing. But if you don't understand that, it it can hurt you. You can do the wrong thing. So yeah, it can help you with link building, both internally and getting backlinks. It can scan your content. AI can scan your content on your website and saying, we think you should link this to this. I've also seen it do really humorous things, saying, and it wants you to link something completely irrelevant because it sees a certain word or a certain word using a piece of content that's not really relevant to the other piece of content. But this software is saying, well, hey, you should have a link from this piece of content to that piece of content. And no, you shouldn't, because it's irrelevant. So it can help, but again, you have to have an understanding. If you don't have a basic understanding of what's going on, how these things all interconnect and work together, you can draw a lot of incorrect conclusions. I use the analogy a lot of times of bounce rate in Google Analytics. Bounce rate by itself tells you nothing. It has to be looked at in context with other things like dwell time and time on site. Because if someone goes to your website because they want your phone number, they go to your website, they get your phone number. Well, in Google Analytics, that's going to show as a bounce, but it served its purpose. They got your phone number and they called you. So you got the result you wanted. But in Google Analytics, that's a bounce. So you have to understand all these things in context. So
Yeah.
Can it help? Yes. It can help in the context that it can give you a starting point. It can give you ideas of what you maybe should do, but you have to have a deeper knowledge of what's going on in order to properly implement what it's telling you should or shouldn't do.
Yeah. Some of the biggest wins we've had with AI in SEO is for sure building out content, right? Helping us in our analytics of, where there's some gaps, or if there's gaps in the keywords that we're ranking for. But again, we rely on other tools for that for the most part. But then once we know that information, going to AI, doing some iterative creative process from a writing standpoint of, here's the keyword we want to cover, here's the rough topic we're trying to meet with this article. Give just like the anecdote that Ken gave. Your name's now Kevin. Is it can spit out some iterations of that, which can be valuable from a creative process if you're an SEO driven writer and understand what you're looking for. And then you can then take that and you can say, hey, we want a meta description, an SEO meta description for this page and this topic, and we need it to fit into this many words. And chances are, people, that it will not fit into those words. You'll have to go through like 5 iterations with the ChatGPT or whatever you're using to get it down to what you want, because even though it can do some things, it doesn't do all things well. And then, yeah, you can start to do some other things. But we find from a creative standpoint that it gives the experts quicker wins through the iterative process of writing and creating content, but only the experts, right? Like they have to understand what they're trying to achieve. And usually they're using other tools to diagnose and uncover what are the things we need to do for the most part. So that's just kind of my point from SEO. Anything else from your standpoint, Ken?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is just because it was generated by AI doesn't mean it's unique. And unique content is a critical concept that we haven't really brought up yet. But
No.
if it's duplicate content, not seen as unique content, it's going to be ignored, by the search engines. Because and the other thing is just, is it detectable as AI? If it's detectable as AI, then Google is probably going to knock it down some, because Google is most concerned, and this is part of the EEAT process or framework that they've set up. It wants expertise and authority content from somebody who is an authority. And if it's written by AI, it doesn't see it that way. And so it's going to knock it down according to those parts of the framework. So that I think that's important. Just because you can press a button and generate, some content doesn't mean that it's going to pass all of the tests that it needs to. And most people don't know to think about that or check for that.
Yep. Great point.
Anything generated by AI or any content generated by AI is generated from content that's already out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to be clear too, like for the most part, it's not always true, but for a lot of creative work, like, in fact, most artists would actually say this, that there is no original idea, right? Like all ideas come from a seed, a concept of something that they've seen before, and they've amalgamated multiple, ideas in their head in order to come up with a new idea. So it's not, even the idea that we're using other people's ideas is nothing new. Like, again, it's you have to be super careful that you're not plagiarizing in whatever form that is, whether it's artwork or words. But also with the, I think it's a fair idea to share that, a creative writer never starts from zero. They're always gathering and researching and pulling in ideas from existing sources in order to take that and create a new piece of content. So the AI is, in some way, is actually, if it can do that and rewrite the content, it's almost doing it in a way that we're doing naturally now anyways, if that makes sense.
I want to touch on something here though, that, you know, right now in the creative endeavor, humans have five senses that we know of, and those all come into play in the creative
Mm.
process.
Yeah.
And right, AI doesn't have those senses, and therefore it can't make some of the connections that
Mm.
humans might make from hearing or smelling or tasting, that generate that seed of creativity.
Hmm. I love that, Ken.
And AI is not there. When it gets there, yikes.
We'll cover that in another podcast someday.
Hopefully in
if
the
we're
century or
if we're
more.
still alive. That's right. Um, hey, we've talked about SEO. Paul, I thought a really good you've actually touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper for our listeners. What about advertising? Can AI help with that? And if so, how? And what are some things to look for and things to avoid with that?
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask Ken about AI and social media, but
Oh, did I skip one?
Yeah,
We
but I
can
mean, it's the same answer. I mean, it's using an AI tool to slice and dice. It's a productivity tool. You can use it to build out, a social media plan. And it'll give you a nice little task list that, again, you need to go through and vet and say, yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm going to do some of these things, or no, that doesn't make sense to me. It's not worth doing. um, you know it, it can break up long form content into smaller bite-sized chunks, which is what you need on social media. It can maybe even help you write some pithy or interesting headlines or captions, that can drive some activity, maybe even generate ideas for hashtags. So again, it's an ideation tool that and I think it's a productivity tool, again, if it's in the right hands.
Yeah,
And I think that really is kind of how it pertains to a lot of different uh, components of marketing.
yeah. Great points. And thanks, Paul, for pointing out that I skipped a question there. And thanks, Ken, for answering that. So Paul,
well,
advertising.
yeah, and
Oh,
one of the things it can do is, like targeting and audience segmentation. And this, again, this is nothing new. If you're in Google AdWords, and you create audiences, okay, let's say you're a remodeler and you do bathroom, kitchen, and basement remodeling, and you say, okay, I want to retarget anyone that looks at any content based on kitchen remodeling. Okay, that's audience segmentation. And that's, you're using AI to do that, or Google is using AI to do that. And you know, customer preference, if you have a customer that tends to buy a certain, if you have a, if you're a clothing manufacturer, or you're a clothing, you sell clothing and shoes, and you have a customer that has a tendency to buy t-shirts as opposed to sweatpants, Okay, then that's audience segmentation, and AI can say, hey, this group of customer buys this type of clothing, and this audience buys this type of clothing. That can help you build advertising campaigns to target those particular segments. So I mean, again, it's become more pervasive, or people are more aware of it because of ChatGPT, but it's really nothing new. It's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, one of the things I see in Google, like just using Google Ads as an example, and I don't even know if it's AI driven or if it's just algorithm, like kind of, you know, not as smart as we think it is, because it's certainly not giving you good advice, is the Google Ads recommendations are sometimes absolutely awful. Like they are the worst things you could do as an advertiser
Well,
because
hey,
they own,
those recommendations are there to make Google money. So
for
from
sure.
Google's perspective,
Yeah.
they're absolutely great recommendations.
Yes. But Google's not it's your money, not Google's.
Well,
So
Google doesn't
you
care
as an
about that.
advertiser better be darn careful with them.
Google doesn't care about that.
No, but our listeners do.
Yes, they do.
Hopefully.
So just be careful of those. Any other thoughts on advertising, Ken?
Well, again, I think it's, what it can do is it can accelerate the decision making process because it can gather large amounts of information that wouldn't easily be able to be done, um, even through some of the existing tools that have been out there for a while, and pull them together so that it's going to give you access to and pull together that information so that maybe you can make some better decisions and bring to your awareness something that maybe you didn't know before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think something you have to be careful of is data paralysis. We live in a society, you can collect so much data that you're just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Well, and,
Yeah.
and that's also an opportunity for AI to alleviate that, to say, look, here's all the data that's out there, but we've sifted it down to where this is what we think is the best way to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
In all my corporate marketing jobs, the one thing that came out of that was really clear was we had so much data at our fingertips that it wasn't the data that was important. The data undergirded and provided us with what we needed in order to make decisions, but it was the insights that actually we could draw out from the data. And I think you're absolutely right. Like as AI, and I hate to use the word evolve because that scares some people, but as AI develops, I think that part of it can become really, really valuable to us as business owners because it'll help us slice and dice data. And truthfully, I think what we really want is that it will help us understand our customers and our prospects better so that we can better communicate and better serve them. And I think that's probably the key thing with any kind of AI that we should be looking at as business owners is, yes, it can help create some processes. It can help us use a tool that will speed up some of our development of things. But really, the whole point of it is content is never for content alone purposes. It's to help us reach the people that we're trying to communicate with in better ways that better serve them. And I think if it can help us do that, then it's a tool that's valuable to us for sure.
yeah.
Ken, let me make sure I'm not skipping a question here. Awesome. We've talked a lot about some pretty cool stuff that AI can do. Being in the industry, as we all are, the marketing industry, and using AI, and we've been playing with it for a few years now, I think I can safely say that most marketing experts see AI as a tool and a support for certain efforts, as we've discussed. But as with all tools, they can be used, they can be misused. Let's take a look at some of the downsides of AI for small businesses. I think you've a little bit broached this, but talk a little bit more about what are some of the downsides, the dangers, the minefields that small businesses should avoid when looking at AI as it currently stands.
Yeah. So I guess the first one is really it pertains both to the AI, but also to the person using AI, and that is limited understanding and expertise. again, AI is only going to be as good as the data that it has access to, and it's only going to be as good as the prompts that are fed to it from the person who's using it. But then on the flip side, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs have a characteristic to where they're just doers, and and they're very action oriented. And so I think there's a great risk that somebody who's got a really strong entrepreneurial drive can just pop in some information, quickly get a result out of some AI tool and act on that very quickly. And I think that that's a very risky thing to do. uh, it's great that they're action takers and very action oriented, but again, you've got to vet the data. You've got to make sure that it makes sense, that it still works, and not just operate, get a quick answer and then say, yeah, that fits with my gut, and act on it and hope that everything's going to work. I think that's really risky. We still don't know all of the security and privacy issues around all of this. One of the things that really scares the daylights out of me is people using AI to crack passwords.
Mm.
Because I mean, you talk about an application that I think is just ripe for exploiting for bad actors. It's probably that, and that scares the crap out of me. Um, Over reliance. I mean, you can't just rely on this. Um, Inaccuracy of the information. Again, I can't stress this enough. Just because whether I mean, think about what you do when you Google something, or you use a search engine to find an answer. You click through and you vet that information.
Or you should, at least.
At least you should.
Right.
So just because you plug something in to an AI tool and it generates a result, and you're like, oh, okay, great, I don't have to do anything more. Boom, I'm off to the races. That's really dangerous. You still have to vet information. And one of my biggest concerns, from a society perspective, is we've we don't have a lot of critical thinking going on right now. And that scares me, because that can be really dangerous and feed the echo chambers, and all that kind of stuff that we might not even be aware that we got trapped into.
Ken, we have zero critical thinking going on.
Well, yeah.
I mean it. I put this into Google, and Google said this, so it's got to be true. I saw it on Facebook, so it's got to be true.
Yeah.
I'm pleased when I hear the younger generation actually being somewhat critical of what they see on Google results and social media. So there is some hope.
But what's happening is they're turning to TikTok and
Mm.
they're turning to AI tools as an
Mm.
alternative to the classic search engines,
Mhm.
which is scary, because they have a healthy skepticism about some of the results that they're getting from some of the more traditional tools. They're going to new tool sets, which we really we don't know how accurate and up to date the information is overall across a broad range of things. And so I think that that's also a very dangerous thing as well, because
Sure.
those are the younger you are, the more likely you are to be turning to TikTok. And I just saw a study that younger people are starting to use a chat GPT as an alternative to a search engine way faster than any other segment of the population. So that's dangerous. Attribution of the source. We don't
Mhm.
know where the information comes from. So how do we know if it's accurate? That's a real problem. Um, Legal and regulatory. We don't know if it's stepping on creative licensing. I mean, you hear anecdotally that it's taken content directly from people and generated it as an output. But we haven't seen the legal or regulatory um, concerns there. And we've talked about the echo chamber, and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, there's just, it's exciting because, but look, I think the best way to approach this is to look at it as a productivity tool right now, and not rely on it to be the end all be all trustworthy source that you need to make all of your decisions around.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and some of the stuff too. If if some of our listeners or viewers have tried ChatGPT, it's a chat kind of prompt based structure, and the more you stay within one chat session, the more bias it becomes according to how you ask, what answers it gives, and it almost becomes its own echo chamber within the results that it's spitting out too.
Yeah.
Um, I know we're running out of time. Paul, do we have time to answer a little bit more? I thought it would be good to go a little bit deeper about ChatGPT by OpenAI, because it's been garnering the most press. And certainly, when I'm talking to business owners, that's the thing that keeps coming up, that, hey, it can solve all our marketing problems. Can you share some of the ways that a small business could leverage ChatGPT that maybe we haven't covered yet? And also specifically with that, maybe some things they might want to avoid.
Yeah, I think we've kind of touched on a lot of this. Is that one of the, if you're a small business and you haven't gone down this path yet, so to speak, I think start with a good CRM, because any good CRM is going to leverage AI to some degree. And I think something you asked with ChatGPT is that things to avoid, things you shouldn't do. It's not the be all end all. It's not going to solve all your problems. You can't just plug something in and take the output without vetting it and use it. So it's really, use your frickin' brain, okay?
That's the best quote from this podcast so far. Use your freaking brain, people.
Yeah.
Look at what it's giving you and use some common sense, if that still exists, and say, okay, this makes absolutely no sense. Okay, maybe this isn't the best idea. Just don't think of it. It's not some kind of silver bullet. It's a machine. It's going out. You're putting in a prompt, and it's going out, and it's collecting data, and it's giving you an output, and that output is going to be dependent on the input. I know it's cliche, garbage in, garbage out, still applies. Okay. Just because it's ChatGPT, OpenAI, whatever you want to call it, it's still ultimately it is a computer going out saying, okay, this is what you asked for. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to find this information. I'm going to give you this output. That doesn't mean the output is true or relevant. So I think the biggest thing I can say is don't take it as, if I put this prompt into ChatGPT, whatever it gives me is true and good and valid. That's not the case. Could be, but not necessarily.
What I found is that it often helps me remember something that I need to include. I love using it to create plans. Because inevitably, I mean, look, we're all busy. There's so many things that are changing. There are new and evolving channels, and sometimes, even if we do this over and over again, even if we have templates, putting something in, to say, give me a plan, on how to use social media marketing to recruit preschool teachers, and it spits out 10 or 12 different things. Chances are I probably would have not thought about a couple of those things. And, it doesn't mean that I'm going to adapt them or adopt them, either one. But I might. And I think it just helps me think a little bit more thoroughly, because I'm still making value judgments. I'm still relying on my expertise. And I think the thing is, if you don't have any real world experience in consuming the output that's created by these tools, they can be really misleading, and they can take you down a dangerous path of, that's either incorrect, or it's duplicate content, or it's clearly written by a machine and it's uninteresting. and will turn people away, and maybe even turn the search engines away. So that's why I think it's super important to have, you've got to have life experience still. These tools aren't replacing humans yet, because we still have to rely on our world experience.
Yeah.
It's a great starting point, but you can't copy and paste, so to speak.
Yeah. Don't forget who your two audiences are, people. It's robots and humans, and it's been like that since the beginning of the internet. And you can't forget that. But the end goal is always the human connection, and that's where all of this is leading. So, guys, I think this is a
How
good
long is
place
this internet fad going to last anyway?
I actually I had another big question that I think we'll leave to another podcast. It could be a standalone, but I think this is a good place to wrap up. Thank you, Ken and Paul, for sharing your thoughts on this topic of AI for small business marketing. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. Please share if you find value in this podcast. Share it with people within your circle of influence. If you have ideas of topics that you want us to cover, we'd be happy to do that. So send them on in. And yeah, until next week, as Paul said, use your frickin' mind and keep calm and market on, people. Have a great day.